To Mosaic Financial Partners monthly webinar series. Today's presentation is Difficult Discussions, How to Have Effective Family Meetings. I'm Holly Gilling-Kindle, an advisor with Mosaic for over 14 years, during which time I've had the pleasure of providing sustainable wealth management solutions to our client partners. I'm here with Ricci M, Victorio, Managing Partner at Mosaic Family Business Center. Ricci and I are both certified professional co-active coaches through the Coaches Training Institute, and our education enables us to facilitate successful family business discussions because we believe that no business gain is worth a family loss. Ricci has been coaching families and family businesses through difficult transitions and succession for over 20 years. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. We'd like to make this an interactive presentation, so please be sure to ask questions throughout. You're able to do so by utilizing the questions or chat function in the GoToWebinar panel. We'll be monitoring those questions and we'll be able to incorporate them. The first 45 minutes of our time together will be spent with prepared remarks and your audience comments and questions. We will also have time at the end for Q&A. Now, please help me in welcoming Ricci and Victorio to talk about how to have difficult discussions.
Thank you, Holly. That was great. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us to address an issue that is facing business owners, whether they have family members in the business, whether it's non-family managers. Difficult discussions are, well, they're difficult, which is why we tend to back away and wish they would just disappear. So today's webinar is structured to help family business owners, family members in a business, how do you navigate those conversations, but also the professional firms. I work with law firms and financial planners, architectural firms, and people are people. So whether you're related or not, when we have to talk about difficult topics, whether it's performance or expectations or unmet expectations or exit strategy or succession planning, those topics can be very delicate. And we're going to address some of the typical environments where these conversations happen, better environments for them to happen, and give you some practical tools to actually navigate those conversations on your own. All right, so if you are working with a family business or anyone, you might have heard this conversation before. I fired my son today, and then his mother fired me. And then her father fired her, and then his wife fired him. I guess there won't be much conversation at the dinner table tonight. And this is the conundrum that families and their businesses have been facing for years and years, for decades. So what is it about the oxymoron of a family business? Well, families are all about unconditional love and acceptance. We love our children unconditionally. We want them to succeed, and we'll do anything possible to help them succeed. But a business is all about performance and accountability. So when you put the two together, how do you lovingly and professionally work with people who cross both boundaries? And this is our topic for today. Some of the concerns that we see with family businesses are, how can we work together without creating a rift between the company and our without any animosity? How do family members be brought into a company without making managers feeling nervous? Am I being replaced? Is my son or daughter going to perform well? Will it look bad on me? What if one child is not qualified to be in the business and the other is? How do you address that issue without creating sibling rivalry? How do you gauge a family member's performance objectively? Ideally, it's not going to be you addressing your daughter's performance. You'd like to have a manager doing it. Granted, I can be the best manager around, but it would be very difficult to give feedback to my own kids because I want them to love me and not feel that I am being too hard on them. How do you exit or fire a family manager? This is very delicate and an issue, especially if we have unmet expectations, whether generation 2 is misplaced and they're not in the right position, or they were trying to please their parents and so they joined the family business, but it really isn't a match for them, or they just do not have the skills to be able to perform the duties that are being asked of them. And then the other issues that face family business owners is how do we handle stock ownership and inheritance? And how do we maintain those boundaries between professional and personal relationships? You know, do we have conversations around the dinner table? No. You know, we'll talk about best places for when do you have a family council to talk about family business topics, and it definitely should not be at the Thanksgiving table. Some other concerns, if you don't have family members in your business or you don't have a family business, but you have a significant legacy, these are more, I'd say, on the strategic family level. How do we share and develop a family vision if we want to perpetuate a legacy? And how can we do that in an open environment? How do we clarify our expectations of our children with their inheritance? What do we expect of them? Are there strings attached? Or, you know, when we say no strings, what does that really mean? How do we share important aspects of our estate planning? That's a very difficult topic. You know, parents are usually pretty close to the vest. But usually when your children, what we see is when your kids start to be 20s and their 30s and their 40s, and they're navigating their own families, it's really important that you start sharing those aspects of your estate planning, because I can tell you that shock of learning about what the planning is about and where inheritance is going is not something you want to add or compound onto the shock of a family loss. It just makes things very, very messy. How do we talk about uncomfortable issues like money and accountability? Whether it doesn't matter whether they're working for you or not, but it does matter how they're, you know, if they're receiving income from you in some way, you will probably have expectations of what you want them doing with it and managing it. And lastly, one of the most significant topics is how do we reconcile differences so we can get on with planning for the future. It's tough when we bring a lot of baggage to the table, and we have history, we have past. All groups do. But at some point, we have to be able to put that baggage down and say, all right, we didn't do so well in the past, but we're going to set up a system that allows us to communicate, to clarify our expectations, and to fulfill those expectations from now going forward. And usually, if we can get enough trust at the table to say, all right, we're going to have a new beginning, having some coaching definitely helps get the family through so that you can start building new trust and new levels of experiences together rather than judging off the past. Now, for those of you who aren't in a family business, don't own a family business, or don't work with them, you might be sitting there feeling rather smug. Well, I don't have to deal with that. I work with professional managers and a team. But what you will see, and I think our slide is not advancing. We have a little technical thing here. Thank you. I think that should do it. Yes, families aren't the only ones who aren't struggling. What we've learned is that in professional organizations, at least 80% of the issues are relationship-oriented, and only 20% are technical or procedural. So let's look at some of the top 5 dysfunctions that we see in all teams, whether there's family or not. The first one, very typical, it's everywhere, you can't escape it, and that's avoidance. And that is really in seeking for, when you have avoidance, not wanting to deal with issues, you're going to be having artificial harmony. Oh yeah, everything's fine. We don't need a coach. We don't need help. We're doing just fine. But when we do a little digging, we find that everyone's carrying that bag of rocks, and they keep putting their issues into the bag, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And then one day, when it gets so heavy that that employee or family member can't carry it anymore, they're going to explode and just, whap you with the bag of rocks, and you're going to wonder, well, where did that come from? So in refusing to deal with issues as they come, they store up and then explode. And one thing that we really encourage and coach our clients to do is to practice dealing with issues as they come up when they're small, and we can deal with them and move on. The second dysfunction that we see in the workplace is a toxic environment. And what do we mean by that? Well, if you have people, it puts people at odds with each other, or it's us against them, it's the boss and the employees, it's family members, sibling rivalry. You can just go in any direction. What creates that toxicity? Try saying that one. Mm-hmm. All right, so what we're looking for is that key member that is causing that, or the kernel of dysfunction that is spurring people to churn. And what that does is it can take even positive experiences and turn them into a negative. It also can transform a functioning team that's communicating. They'll start believing the myths that are being propagated by that disgruntled employee. So we really have to look for, where are those seeds of discontent? Are they based in reality, or is it based in a myth? And it's really a spin for an employee or a family member who is trying to look better in the eyes of everyone else. Lack of accountability. This is a big one. It costs organizations millions of dollars every year. That finger pointing, the blame, confusion, unavailability, these are all symptoms of lack of accountability. I didn't do it. I didn't know. I didn't get the memo. I don't understand. Now, sometimes confusion is just a pushback. Sometimes it's based in, does this person really know? But that lack of accountability, of not stepping up. And the biggest part of that is not taking ownership. And that's something that we're really working hard on with our organizations. Instead of having that hierarchical where it's the boss's job and I just do what I'm told, to really having everyone step up to taking responsibility and ownership for how well the group does, and engaging the group, the team, the company into achieving those goals. Pushback's another one. That defensive response when you try to give feedback or guidance or corrections, and the person pushes back and says, well, no, that won't work. It's impossible, or that'll never happen, or I can't tell that person that. Whatever the pushback is, that's another one of the causes for dysfunction in the workplace. So when we see that pushback, it's usually when people are in reactive modes. In fact, almost all of these dysfunctions are coming from being reactive. Where we try to move people is to being in a creative mode, where they are creating their solutions together in a collaborative way. And the last one is one that's probably most everyone's favorite, is distraction. What is distraction? Well, we will have attraction to drama. When we are bored or feeling disengaged at work, or feeling that somebody owes us, so we're going to take time or resources, this distraction, we see it using the internet when people should be working, they're surfing, which is a fairly new phenomenon in the last 10 years, but gossiping, backstabbing, creating myths about people or supposition, wondering why one person gets to leave 15 minutes early before everyone else, and wondering what that's all about. So that distraction can really tear apart a team. So as you can see, this is not something that's unique to a family organization. It's not unique to a professional organization. This is just people. So how do we untangle these issues? Now, one of the big jobs, I am known as the detangler, and I love that title. And what does that mean? Is unbundling the issues of family and business, so that we can look at, well, what are the family issues that are being tied into the business place? And what are the business issues that are being pulled into the family? Now, if you're not a family, we still have to detangle what are the personal issues and what are the professional or business task-oriented issues. So it's a similar kind of untangling that we do, is really looking at, are we communicating badly together? Is that what our problem is? Or are we not working well together because we don't know how to work together? So really taking a look at what side of the fence those issues are coming from. So how do we get started? Well, I'm a real believer in setting expectations for these kinds of discussions. I call them ground rules or Ricci's rules of order if I have a particular group that might need a firmer hand. But we have to all come to agreement on, we're going to have today's discussion, we're going to talk about a couple of difficult topics. We're going to recognize those topics of what they are and then make agreements for how can we expect to get through this topic without blowing up, because that's what everyone has to first agree is our primary objective is to get through this conversation and come out with some positive steps moving forward towards solution. So some sample ground rules are remembering, we're not mind readers. We don't know what you're feeling. We're not going to be able to tell if you've had a bad day before you arrived, which can taint your presentation. Sometimes I'll have someone at a meeting and they're appearing to not be engaged or irritated with everything that's being said. And upon inquiry, finding out it had nothing to do with the meeting, but that employee or that person was having some difficulties at home and it was carrying over. We don't know that. So all we can know is, well, this person was unhappy and judging our discussion. Maybe they don't want to be here. So really taking ownership of your truth, sharing that when it's appropriate. I like to do check-ins before we get started. How is everybody? Is there anything you want to clear? Just so that you can let it go and put it aside and be totally present. Secondly is being positive when receiving input. Easier said than done. But to recognize that it takes courage for someone to say to their parent, their boss, their manager, their employee, something that's truthful, that they might be worried, will you take it the wrong way? We want to keep it professionally based, especially when we're talking about business issues. But to just step out and say, when this happens, this is what occurs for me, or I'm uncomfortable, or I'm unable to do my job. And how much courage does it take to step out to try and make it better? Well, we want to acknowledge that person. So when receiving the input like that, especially if you're a parent or a business owner, the manager, to say, thank you. I know it took a lot for you to say that to me, and I appreciate the thought that you put into it. Let's talk about it. And it's another thing as well to recognize that it takes courage and grace to receive feedback, especially if it's not what we want to hear. So there needs to be compassion on both sides of the delivery of the one giving the feedback and the one receiving, because it takes courage and grace on both sides. If you're really worried about it, having 3 people in the room is really a great idea, whether it's a coach like Holly or myself, or someone who's skilled at navigating those conversations. And we do a lot of training where we teach business owners how to have those one-on-one check-ins, we like to call them check-ins, or feedback with an employee, so that they learn how that give and take can work and create a positive outcome. The third aspect of our ground rules is to remember that everyone wants to make a contribution. They want to contribute. They want to be acknowledged for that contribution. They want to feel a part. They want to belong. So if you remember that, to practice acknowledging those offers that people give in idea building. A classic is you have the big idea board and all ideas go on the board. And we don't judge them while we're creating, while we're inventing, while we're exploring. Everything that comes into the head and comes out the mouth goes on paper. That's the key. That's the first step in acknowledging we heard you and we'll remember this. So when you go back to look at ideas, it becomes easy to tie in a couple of them and say, oh, we've got a theme going here. Maybe we can tie, idea 2, 3, and 5 together and make one. And that's going to really acknowledge participation in your brainstorming sessions. All right, so we're going to move to what we call the relationship engine. It's a coaching tool that we use in proactive coaching that really helps teams and duos talk through difficult issues and have a process to navigate those difficult discussions. And this works beautifully in the workplace, whether you're related or non-related. works beautifully in family conversations if you're in a family council. So we felt this is a really universal tool that everyone who is with us today could enjoy the benefits of. So what do we mean by taking responsibility? Well, the first step, taking responsibility. I would even back up one more step in taking responsibility to acknowledge what is so, naming the elephant in the room. When we do that, all of a sudden, you can see the tension fall off shoulders when someone, whether it's the coach, the facilitator, the leader, says, today we want to acknowledge there's this issue, 1, 2, and 3. We know it's hard for everyone, and we want to talk through and see if there isn't a better way for us to deal with the issue. So once that elephant is named in the room, then the first step in reaching a solution is to be able to have each individual take ownership or responsibility for their part. Blame doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So if we can acknowledge what we have done in contributing to that issue, and it doesn't remove blame or responsibility, from the other person, but each person goes around the room and says, okay, I see how I reacted negatively in that when this happened, and I'm sure there was a better way for me to handle that. So questions for you to ask yourself, what is my responsibility in this issue? And what is going to be my response when people say, yeah, you did that, you do that? And how do I want to respond? I ask my clients in preparing them for discussions like this is, who do you want to be in this discussion? How do you want people to feel about you when the meeting is over? And so that should be your point of being. I don't want to be confrontational. I want to be open. Okay, so when people are saying, you're always discounting us and walking out of the room and we're having a conversation about something if you don't agree, is to hold that place of being open and saying, oh, I don't know that I really paid attention to that. I'm sorry, I didn't notice. Or, well, yeah, that's because I didn't know how to deal with it. But at least starting with saying, oh, yes, okay. And what seems to be important to the person that you're talking to or to the group? And what requests do you have of others? And of course, in preparing for these conversations, I ask each person who's coming into that discussion, what's the outcome that you want to have? Are you willing to play with that outcome? Are you willing to collaborate to maybe seeing that there is an additional good outcome for everyone? If we could find a solution that everyone is happy with, would you be willing? And so having that thought in mind is the initial step in having a successful conversation. So the second step would be choosing. Now, how can we be ready to choose? But this is the choose section where it's brainstorming. And you want to consider a range of possible options rather than just 1 or 2 ideas. And this is really an optimal discussion to have with that third person, where you have a non-involved third person who can be objective and ask good questions and maybe even put ideas together, that outlier, as Malcolm Gladwell would say, that outlier who says, well, why do you do it that way? Could you consider ABC instead of DEF? So really getting the best thinking from everyone. And once you start throwing ideas up there, it immediately transforms it from negotiating to brainstorming. So again, we're moving from the reactive to the creative mode. And that's where people start to connect. They start to feel the adrenaline flowing. It creates a positive physical, emotional impact so that you can have better conversations. So the related questions would be, what ideally do you individually and collectively want? And that's important. What do you want individually and collectively? And most of the time when I'm dealing with a family harmony issue, where we've got family and business or just really heartfelt issues that are tearing people apart, everyone generally wants the same thing. They want to have harmony in their family. They want their relationships to be loving and as easy as possible. And they want their businesses to be successful. Well, it's easier said than done, yes. But if you can start from those outcomes, we can start building on, well, what would help us be a more harmonious family? What would help us have happier holiday events together? What would help us work together better? So, and a question I think many coaches ask is, if you knew that you couldn't fail, I typically use my fairy godmother. I'm your fairy godmother, and I can grant you any outcome. What would it be? And you've got to have the vision in your mind, in your heart, before you can actually make it a reality. So getting that picture in your mind, knowing what that perfect outcome would be, what would the win-win-win be with no losers, and then manifesting that, really working towards making that the reality. It's amazing how easy it becomes once we get everyone collectively on the same page in a vision. That's the what. So really thinking about what, not getting caught up in the how. The how is the easy part. The what is really the harder part. And then continue to brainstorm. Now, once we brainstorm, we're going to move to alignment. Now, alignment and choosing are two stages that you might go back and forth in. So in alignment, it's taking those ideas and narrowing them down and finding out really what is going to work for the group. So selecting a course of action that will provide the most benefit for everyone. And if you go through those ideas and you find, well, this one we don't have any ideas on this page that provide the win-win-win. And we are committed to taking the time to see if there is a win-win-win solution. You might have to go back to choice and brainstorm some more. Take a break and come back and really play with perspectives and step outside of the box that you created for what your fact-based decision-making should be. So what are some of the related questions? Well, who will be affected by our actions? Who benefits? Who might be negatively impacted? That's not a win-win. So in a family organization that is striving for family harmony and preserving relationships as well as business success, if we have a loser, that's not going to be good. What course is most aligned with our vision and values and our mission? Now, and here's an interesting thing. What's the rational choice of the mind? Okay. That doesn't always feel so good. So checking in with the heart, the gut, what feels right? And sometimes even if a logical decision, you say, well, this seems to be the most logical, but something just doesn't feel right, it usually will not stick. So you've got to go back and look at, okay, if this is rational, what's not feeling right? What's out of alignment in this choice? What we're really looking to do is line up mind and heart so that you have internal alignment, and then within the group you're also in alignment. So once you've found this alignment and everyone has had a chance to speak their ideas and talk about differing approaches, you're going to get commitment. And this is the beautiful part about managing these difficult topics is once you've got that alignment, you can then get to the how. Who's going to do what? You can let the other people know, I'm going to do A, B, and C, and someone else will say, I'm doing D, E, F, and you can create a list and decide how much time do we need, when do we want to get back, what's the outcome. So that becomes really the problem-solving part that most groups, I find, will initially want to jump to before they've even done the exploration part. They'll say, well, let's just solve the problem. And why do we need to talk about emotional issues? Why do we have to establish trust? Why do we need to know? Well, if you want buy-in, if you want people to really feel that this is a solution we've created together and be committed to it, you've got to enroll them in the process of making that decision. And jumping to the end is never a good way to navigate these conversations. All right, so I think it's probably fairly obvious how this can work in a business environment. We have executive teams, we have feedback sessions, we have coaching sessions, we'll have management team discussions, and this is a good tool to use in those venues. But you might be saying, all right, so how do I apply this to my family? I have kids who are in the business. I have kids who are not in the business. I have a spouse who works with me. We don't have children in the business, but my spouse and I share ownership and we work together, and sometimes there are things I just don't know how to address. So this is what we have found to be the most effective tool in family communication, and that's the family council. And family council is a tool that even if you don't have a significant legacy, to pull your family together to talk about important decisions. What do we want you to know what to do if something happens to us while we're on vacation. We need to make a decision about mom, and she needs to be moved into assisted living. That would be time for a family council with siblings and probably their spouses. Family councils are different from family dinners. Family dinners, lots of conversation can happen and lots of little decisions can be made. But when I know in our household, when we say we need to have a family council, my children know that something important needs to be discussed, and they come prepared to have a discussion. And it's not surrounding food, it's not surrounding drink, it's really, we need to talk about something that's important to us. And it's a different tone. So how do we do that? How do we set that up so we can have those kinds of conversations without blowing up the family? I've had new clients come to me and say, oh yeah, we tried having a family council last Thanksgiving and now nobody's speaking. We'll never do that again. And that's the point. A family council has got to be deliberately set up, and I would suggest that you have someone, a trusted advisor, a coach, a facilitator who knows how to set these up and to advise you on best approaches. So I'm going to talk about a general approach. So what is a family council? And a family council, as I mentioned, is designed to create an organized and structured forum where parents can educate their children on estate planning, financial management, household organization, talking about their legacy. If it's a business owner, a business family, this is a place to talk about succession planning and their vision of the future and how they want to, do they want to pass this business on to the next generation? Sometimes that question can't be answered until you know if the next generation is interested. And that's another very important part of the discussion regarding succession is, do you want to? Are you interested? Not to assume, well, yeah, this business is worth a lot of money. Of course, you must be interested in coming into the business. Maybe they're not. Maybe they are working for you because it's the way to be with you, not because they have a passion for the business. And that will affect their performance, especially when you're not there. So those are some of the dynamics of estate planning and succession planning that would be good topics for the family council. Also, having these discussions is the practice session for siblings and family members to learn how to interact more harmoniously when you're talking about money and important planning details. The typical dysfunction or not feeling, adult children feeling that they're not being seen as mature adults. They're still being treated as children and they're 30 years old. And I've seen tears come up and frustration saying, every time, Dad, I try to approach this topic with you, you treat me like I'm 12 years old again. And so breaking through and having those honest discussions so that the family can morph and transform into where they are now. We practice, I help my families practice when they're especially having a history of dysfunction, of learning how to take turns, whether it's the talking stick and whoever has the stick gets to have the floor. practicing the give and take. What is sarcasm? And pointing out when somebody gets snarky or snippy and saying, well, what was that? And did you see that hit on the person across the room? And what's the impact of that? It's amazing. It only takes, an outside person to say that once or twice, and people realize, oh, wow, those are old habits, and that's not appropriate here. The other thing that's important about this kind of practice is kids, the next generation, as adults, they may have differences with each other that haven't been resolved. And that artificial harmony, remember those dysfunctions we talked about earlier that hit teens, it hits families too. And if we have this artificial harmony, they'll hold together as long as their parents are around. But, it's as one parent goes on to the next adventure on this, in this universe, and there's only one parent left, it starts to get a little tenser. But when both parents are gone and just the siblings are looking at each other, I've seen families fall apart. They don't really know how to problem solve without one of the parents holding center ground and holding the core values of the family. So this becomes a venue for really affirming core values, what's important to the family, what commitments, problem-solving mechanisms, practicing talking through difficult discussions, involving the in-laws, creating deeper relationships so that you have a greater mind trust when you include more of the family in some important decisions. Also, by sharing information with your kids as they're adults, you can avoid what we talked about earlier, that shock of learning about what your plans were for the business or for your legacy. I had a client who wanted to give all of his estate to a religious organization. And he said, but I don't want anybody to know until after I'm gone. And he had a business, he had 4 children, a wife, and he hadn't talked to any of them about it. And he said, well, you can't, you have to talk to your wife about this. And he said, well, I'm going to, she's got her part, but I'm going to put all of this into charity. And I said, this is going to destroy any relationship, and they're going to be so freaked out over it. They're not going to know what to do. So gradually we were able to have a conversation with that family, and he could talk about his commitment and his passion for the charitable donation he wanted to make. But as a family, they then found a way to honor that commitment and still take care of the business needs and the family needs so that it didn't rip the family apart. But can you imagine the shock that would have happened upon their father's death to discover that everything's gone, completely everything's gone? Even if that was the right thing to do, the shock would have really changed the legacy of this dedicated father's life. Okay, so how do we structure a family council? Well, every family council is unique to the family. It can have a very simple structure, or it can be more complex depending on what the needs are. But there are the bones that go into a family council, and what I like to do is create an agreement. It can be called a family charter. It can be called an organizational memo. It can be called anything that you want. Family constitution is another favorite that people like to use, and it's going to define why are we meeting, what are the objectives we'd like to accomplish, and then the ground rules for how we're going to navigate difficult discussions. How do we want you coming to these meetings? Sometimes they can be more informal, and sometimes they can be very formal. And they might say, well, we want this to be treated as a business meeting. And so we want everyone to come prepared, be dressed appropriately, no pajamas and slippers, please, but let's be dressed. Or let's have this, let's go off-site. We want to really make this to be like a strategic planning meeting for the family. So once a year, some families will go off-site, and they'll plan a family weekend with spouses and kids, but then they'll dedicate one day of that weekend for family council. So defining how you want your family council to operate is really a personal a planning exercise to do with your facilitator, your coach. Generally, I work with the parents, with the shareholders, to get the bones of it, and then we bring it to the family, and we say, all right, this is what we'd like to do. We want to create a family council together, and we would like your input. What do you want to learn? What would you like to achieve? What are some topics you'd like to address? What kinds of activities would you like to do? And again, the more inclusive you are, remember, everyone likes to participate, you'll get better buy-in and more commitment. So how often do we want to meet? Usually, instead of having someone taking minutes, you're going to want someone to coordinate the event, an historian. And then membership is a big topic. Who do we want to attend this meeting? Some families say blood only. I respect that. I understand why. But if you have spouses, if you have in-laws, and you're talking about important issues of estate planning, inheritance, buy-ins, buyouts of stock, and that spouse is going to be affected in some way, they're going to find out one way or the other. They're either going to hear from your direct family member who went to the meeting, and then they're going to go home and, of course, say this is what the meeting was about, and they're going to share their understanding of what was said. I personally have found and believe that if someone is going to be affected by the decisions you're making or that you're talking about, have them in the room. Have your son-in-law being there. Maybe they don't vote on certain family issues, but maybe they do. Are they really family, or are you going to treat them more like outlaws, outside of that circle? It's really a personal decision every family makes. I personally feel that if someone is in the family, they should come to that council. Whether or not, as I said, they vote, they have a right to hearing directly the information so that they're not getting an interpretation. And lastly, attendance is not a birthright. So you might have in-laws coming to the meeting, but there might be someone in the family who has negative behaviors and likes to act up or create drama or showboat or does not get onto the program of listening, cooperating, but likes to blow things up. And I think if you think back in your memory, you might have encountered an individual like that. Usually they're looking for, my experience is they're looking for boundaries. And if they haven't been given boundaries, you get that entitled behavior, and they keep pushing and pushing to see how far they can go. So the one thing we do is we create the boundaries of these are our ground rules. We have agreed to them, and if you do not play by the rules, and we're going to ask you to nicely, we're going to disinvite you until you're ready to play by the rules. So some of the topics, and we've already talked about many of these, so I'm not going to read through the list, but the purpose of having in your family charter, you can identify the purpose. You can talk about charitable gifting, opportunities to enhance your relationships. A good one is personal financial planning. So if you have a financial planner, you have an attorney handling your estate plans, you have probably a CPA or an accountant who helps you with your finances. This is a good place, a good venue to educate your kids or help them get started with the financial planner, start saving and talking about charitable giving. These, and you can bring in your advisors that you trust and maybe get them started. And that is a tremendous activity to do with your kids who are getting started and building their own families. Identifying core values is part of your charter, as well as how do we want to be with each other and what values are important to us. And it's not always the same, but these are many common core values that I see with families. Agenda topics, we've talked about those as well. What steps out on this list is something that we haven't talked about is how do kids come into the business? And this is something that we do with our clients, is helping them establish a family member employment and expectations policy. And it's a policy that makes it easy for everyone to understand what are our expectations educationally, experientially, skill-wise, to qualify to work in the family business, not just because you're looking for a job, but do we have a job that is looking for you? If you've got a child that likes to work summers while they're, going to college, the expectations part of the policy will be very important. Say, this is how we expect you to behave. And just because your name's on the wall doesn't mean that the regular expectations of employees and behavior don't apply to you. In fact, they apply to you 2 times over. So really clarifying that we expect you to step up, to be the better example. And then if you want to have a career in our business, these are the educational requirements we feel that you would need to lead in a management or even a senior executive level. And if you can clarify it when your kids are going to college or in their young professional life, they have an opportunity to make a choice and choose to step in or say, that's not for me. And you can say, all right, so this is how we decide who gets stock or who doesn't, if that's how you're judging who gets stock is by being in the business. So talking that through with your family is key, not just thrusting it on them. And so that's a very good topic to have discussed in the family forum, in the family council. All right, so lastly I want to address is one thing that we do with all of our groups, professional, family businesses, families, is we want to understand who's in the room. So we do use a tool that helps us understand work styles, personality styles, and it gives us an insight into how a person views themselves. How do they like to communicate? What is their work style? What is their, are they take action, let's go do it, doer and a driver, and loves change? Are they that kind of person? Or are they someone who's much more procedural oriented? They like to get things done correctly. They want to think through things before they talk about them. If we can understand what makes people tick, if we understand who's sitting in the room and how they like to approach task projects and handling conversations, we then educate everyone in the room about everyone in the room. And it makes it so much easier to understand why someone might be pushing back or saying, I need time to think. If you rush someone who needs time to think by saying, I need an answer now, you're going to most likely get a no because they need time. So if you know that about someone, you can say, I'd like to be able to reach a decision in a few days, and that will more likely get you a positive result. So we do use them to understand teams, families, partners, and it's a topic that's so rich that we think we want to use that for another webinar, so I'll save it. But we do use a tool called the ProScan survey from PDP Works, and it has been a marvelous tool for us to understand how teams interact and as a teaching tool for those teams that we work with. So here we are. We're at a point for questions, and I'm hoping that there are questions out there. As you can see, what we are feeling is that once you have addressed those emotional issues and you understand who's in the room and what really is at the core of some of those more procedural issues, then it becomes so much easier. Once you have the what identified, the how becomes so much simpler, and we can get on with the planning of estate and succession because we've unraveled all of those emotional issues. So, Holly, do we have questions?
Yes, we do. We've set this time aside for questions, and several have already been submitted, but you all still have time to submit yours as well, so please do so. So here's the first one. People want to know, inquiring minds want to know, when is a good time and the best way to involve my children in the family business?
When they're ready. I think that's the first answer, is when they're ready. So I think the best time to get your kids involved in the business is let them go through it. They could be having experiences, as I mentioned earlier, with the company, working summers or part-time, when they're in college, when there's opportunities. That's what a family business is for, is to have your family around you. But I think the question is addressing more, when is the right time to bring my child in for career? So in a career development path, we would want kids to have completed whatever education you feel is necessary. If it's a journey, a journeymanship I have a client who college isn't as important as the crafts training that they need to get and the internship that they need to experience. So to get whatever training, an MBA or your certification, to be qualified, but then we want kids to go work somewhere else. The first 2 years that a young person is coming into the workforce full-time, out of school, no longer in between semesters, is a huge learning curve, and they're going to make mistakes. And we'd like them to make mistakes somewhere else where people are going to be a little more forgiving or a little more honest and not remember for the rest of your life. And when, you know, I'm a Victorio, so when a Victorio comes on for the first time, he or she, if it's my child, their mistake is going to be remembered for a much longer time if they're learning them in my business than if they learn them in Holly's business.
I don't know about that.
Oh, and plus we can glean from Holly all the experience that she has and bring it back to my office.
Of course, yes, yes, yeah. Sounds good. Well, here's another one. I've heard this one quite a bit. My son just isn't stepping up to the plate right now. How can I make him get with the program and start to make a real contribution to our business?
Okay, so I'm going to answer this 2 ways. First is the coach. You can't make him. He has to make himself. So the first thing is that we would want to look at what's underneath that lack of performance and really find out, is this that your son is not feeling comfortable in this job, doesn't feel suited for it? Do you have a person who is a high-pace, very detail-oriented person who loves to crunch numbers, and you've got them in a sales job because you feel that's the way they should come into the business? They're not going to perform well, especially if they're a reserved communicator. You want someone who is outgoing and comfortable with change and fluent with having to be adaptable. So really looking at, is your son placed in the right job, working with the right manager, mentoring? That's one key. Finding out, does your son have passion for this business? You know, they might be afraid to tell you that they don't. And that's, again, the beauty of having a coach come in and really spend some time working on vision and getting down to the truth. And once recognized, you really do have a passion for it. You're just not in the right place, or you really want to go and make movies instead of, you know, running a car dealership or something like that. Once that is discovered, having the conversation with your son, once you have buy-in saying, yes, I want to be here, this is really what I want, and then you've got to set those expectations, make sure they have a clear job description. They know that the manager who is managing them has total control of whether they're going to stay in or out. If they're afraid to be fired, if they're not afraid to be fired, there's that entitlement. You can't fire me. I'm the boss's son. Well, that's also going to create negative behaviors.
Right, and then there's always the converse, which is that if they're afraid that they can't speak up, they can't actually share without retaliation as well.
Right. So you've got to have a safe environment. I like to set up a mentor board where there's the manager that manages the child, there's the owner, family member, but then you have a non-family member, non-manager person who might be an outside advisor, a coach, or someone in the industry that can be that third party to problem solve when there's an issue.
It's always nice to have a facilitator.
Yeah.
Got another one?
Okay.
Yeah, here we go. What do you recommend for evaluating salaries and career paths promotions for family members?
Okay. I think there's 2 answers. One is, how would you pay a non-family member in that job? And what would their path and responsibilities be? So to not make it exceptional, to have it focused on what would you be paying if you were going outside of the family. But for a family member, I would also have long-term vision in mind. So saying that these are the steps that if you want to be an executive manager or someday lead the company, that these are the steps that you need to take. And you would take that with a fine. If you were doing recruiting at a college and you wanted to get that top-notch MBA student to come on as maybe a junior level manager, you'd be painting a similar kind of picture where am I going, how am I going to get there, and how am I going to get paid?
Exactly. Another question is, should these recommendations differ from the evaluations for non-family members? So should your methodologies differ?
No, I don't think so. I think it creates a lot of animosity. It's like a two-class system. Oh, you're a family member, you have a different track, and I'm a non-family member. So again, I'm one that's all about really having more transparency in an organization, and to say that we recognize whether you're family or non-family member star performers. And so I really don't prescribe to that. It's one thing to bring in a family member to say, we hope that they will achieve becoming an executive manager. We are really aspiring for that. But there's got to be a place where you say, it's not working. You know, you've got to, and it would tear apart the family too. So it's not just the business. Again, we're looking for that yin and yang, basically, of family and business and how they work and coexist together.
Excellent. We have one more.
Okay, we have time.
You've inspired someone, Ricci.
I did.
Not surprising, is it? We're all used to being inspired by Ricci. This question is, I really like the family charter. I'm going to create one right away, and I'm going to give it to my kids at our family dinner next weekend.
Okay. Piano, piano, piano. Slow down just a little bit.
Yeah.
I encourage your enthusiasm. But again, remember, this is a collaborative exercise. And if you're just going to dictate your family, these are our values, and this is our mission, these are our objectives, and everybody show up, you're going to have some resistance. I guarantee it. So really, it's a step back. And for my take charge moms and dads who are used to saying, let's just do it and do it my way because that's the best. It's a new way of working. Maybe what we could say is that instead of leading from the front, you're going to be leading more from surrounding that whole place, from where you're encouraging everybody else in the family to step in and participate, because they're not 5 years old anymore. So to say to the family, I've discovered something that I'm really excited about, and I'd like us to learn more about it to see if it's something that we think would work for us, I think would be a great way to introduce it to your family.
Yeah, and play around with it.
Yeah.
The whole part of you're talking about with the leadership and moving to the side so that people have an opportunity to step forward.
Right.
Exactly.
And remember, we want to be teaching siblings how to make decisions and work together as a family unit. Whether they're working together in a business, there's still family matters that have to be taken care of. And we really do want to establish a pathway for family members without the hierarchical, well, the matriarch, the patriarch, but to be able to have open, honest, authentic, loving discussions about difficult matters.
Well, thank you, Ricci. We're very grateful for you sharing this information. And thank you, everyone, for attending today's presentation in our monthly series. We hope now that you have some new perspectives on how to have difficult conversations, as well as some useful tools for succeeding in your family business. Before we leave, we'd also like to remind you of next month's presentation, Alternative Investments, with our Director of Investments, Dave Coles. We look forward to providing you with more useful financial pieces to help you put together the mosaic of your life.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.